Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the regular meeting of Fernie City Council held at 6:30 p.m. on April 8th, 2025. Kisukukit. We acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located within Kukinamakis, the unceded territory of Yakutat Nucleat First Nation. We recognize that we live and work within their vast lands. The Kanahunik are from Yakutat Nucleat and are members of the Tanaha-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. I'll call the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. and ask for a mover and a seconder for the following staff recommendation: that the agenda for the April 8th, 2025 regular council meeting be amended to move item 9.1, Fernie District Historical Society request to adopt the heritage strategy, pardon me, to item 6.1, the committee of the whole portion of the meeting, and that the agenda be adopted as amended. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Item 4.1, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for the following staff recommendation: that the minutes of the March 11th, 2025 special meeting of council be adopted. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Any discussion on those minutes? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And I'll ask for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the March 25th, 2025 regular meeting of council be adopted. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. I'll now open the floor to public participation and invite public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of issuance of the permit, and a speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes. So I'll look to our gallery. Does anybody wish to speak? Seeing none, I'll check with our manager of communications, and no one online has indicated. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 6.1 under the following recommendation: that council, I'll need a mover and a seconder, that council enter into the committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Ramadas. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. We're now in committee of the whole, and I'll invite our delegation from the Fernie and District Historical Society. Mr. Mike Palomaric.
So, hello. Yes, I'm Mike Palomaric. I'm the President and Board Chair of the Fernie and District Historical Society. So thank you to your worship and councillors for allowing our society to present this evening. I'm here tonight to restart the Fernie Heritage Strategy process with the City of Fernie. So being a historical society, we love history, so let's dig into the history. Bit of a timeline because it goes a little far back. The 2014 OCP included heritage elements in it. And what that did was led to the creation of a task force that was a partnership with our society, the City of Fernie, the Sunaha, heritage consultants, and the wider Fernie community. There was 18 main members of that task force, and I counted over 30 other community groups and individuals, as well as countless surveys that participated in an 18-month-long project. So that work was completed in February 2020, and a presentation was actually made to the city with the report and actions that were requested at the time, and then an implementation phase was to follow. So if you recall what happened in March 2020, we had a worldwide event, and really this strategy went on hold effectively. So it's always been on the table for the Historical Society. And in 2023, to help kickstart the strategy again, we reviewed the goals that were in the heritage strategy and actually incorporated them in the 3-year partnership agreement that we have with the city. As well, we incorporated them in our strategic plan as well. So in the 2014 OCP, you'll see there's a number of key sections there that have heritage strategy goals and actions and recommendations and guidelines. And what we did is incorporated as many of those goals as what we could be responsible in our strategic plan and in the partnership agreement with the city. There was many goals though in there that we can't spearhead, we can't lead, we can't be responsible for. In the OCP, I found it very interesting. They incorporated some pretty significant maps and recommendations. Key one was designating the historic downtown of Fernie, which I thought was very interesting. They also did a bit of an inventory of what they called heritage sites. And just as an aside, I happen to live in one of those blue heritage sites. And my wife and I, we've spent a lot of time researching the historic property, and we spent a significant amount of resources restoring it. And today we're very proud to have contributed something to Fernie's historic heritage. The problem is, however, that while these OCP goals exist, the recommendations and actions haven't been followed up. They haven't been implemented. And as well, the Fernie Heritage Strategy that was presented in February 2020 has never been formally adopted by the city. So last week, I heard the mayor talk very well at the Tourism Fernie AGM about authenticity of Fernie. And I proposed to the council that we shouldn't have to rely on the good fortune of having enough passionate heritage people around to ensure that that authenticity is protected. So why does Fernie have a heritage strategy? We've listed a number of reasons there what the document is. It was included in the package, but fundamentally, it's a guiding resource document for the whole community with a focus on assisting the city to achieve the OCP heritage goals and actions. That's why it was created. So I mentioned Kelowna at this point, because when you look at their heritage activities to date, Fernie is really on the same path. And their city council is ahead of us by a lot. But the good thing about that is that we can copy their successful strategies and their key milestones. For context, their heritage strategy that we're talking about this evening was originally developed in 1985 and adopted in 1995. And they incorporated that into their OCP in 2001, a long time ago. Since that time, they've made very good progress, I believe, in implementing many similar heritage OCP goals and actions. So it's a good template to follow. The other thing to consider, and I really like this when things dovetail, and we've got some good activities coming together. There was as you know, this council passed the June 2024 Fernie zoning bylaw that came from the provincial bill for higher density and new residential zoning. And really, Kelowna as well, and every other community similar to Fernie in BC has had to look at this. But I attended a Heritage BC workshop last year, And one of the presenters was Alana Seisblatt. And she really has been a common resource for Fernie as well as Kelowna and our historical society. And she was actually one of the key members on that task force that I mentioned that developed this strategy. So she was one of the key presenters in this Heritage BC workshop that I was at. And she had some key points that I thought were relevant. Heritage planning is not anti-housing. It's also not anti-density. Rather, heritage planning can be seen as an expert resource in guiding change. So heritage planning, it can manage growth, and importantly, it can minimize regret of bad decisions. So heritage planning can also formalize density and infills, and it's a goal to keep what is valued and add more. So I thought were very relevant points for the growth challenges that Fernie faces today. Specifically though, and the focus of also of this heritage workshop was that Alana was talking about a municipal planning tool. It originally came out of Australia, and it's called Desired Future Character Statements. And actually, Kelowna is on the forefront here because they were the first municipality to adopt this planning tool. So Alana was talking about the experience of that and Kelowna's experience with it as well. And essentially, it's just highlights, and it's a tool that emphasizes those points that Alana and myself just made. One other thing I want to highlight on here, I know that Terry Nelson has presented to council, and Kelowna actually has a heritage tree bylaw, along with lots of other municipalities in both Alberta and BC. So where are we at? There's success stories we can highlight in that pause from the pandemic, even though there's still lots of goals and recommendations outstanding. We submitted a report to the city last month. That was our partnership agreement, and we highlighted our progress, which I thought was very good on the OCP goals that we had adopted as our KPIs. And we're also in the final year of our 3-year partnering agreement with the city on that. So finally, why we're here tonight is we need the city's support to progress these heritage goals. And our first ask is that the city formally adopt the strategies that becomes part of the future OCP that is being planned, and also that it becomes a working document to help implement the current OCP. That's the first recommendation, that this, like I said, this strategy document exists. It had huge community involvement and engagement, and it's there to help implement the OCP. Along with that, 2 other goals that were presented at the time, see I'm running out of time, are, as you can see up there, to look at the heritage register and look at the design review panel. So, does it cost? I submit nothing because those OCP goals exist today.
Thank you, Mr. Palamaric. It's good time management. Questions from council? I have a couple. What happened last time? You present in 2020, you presented to council.
Yep.
It was received by council, but it wasn't adopted by council at the time. Do you, and I know it's before your time with the organization. Do you have any context that
Gordon Sombrowski was on the task force? And
Mr. Sombrowski, you're welcome to come to the podium if
would you know the answer to that,
if
Gordon?
you have an answer.
I'm not sure I have a diplomatic answer, but I will say that it was set aside at the time.
Okay.
And it was made clear that perhaps the time for conversation around it was not that moment. And that's where it was left from our understanding.
Okay, thank you. And the first note I made when I was rereading the heritage strategy was because it's been on, as you as you alluded to, it's been on my mind a
Mhm.
lot lately, is this notion of authenticity. And authenticity is, I've come to believe, particularly in tourist communities, a shared resource for the people who live here and for the people who come here. And I desperately think it's something we need to maintain. And I think the heritage strategy is certainly a tool that does that. I wonder, other communities, and you talked about Kelowna.
Mhm.
But Kelowna had already adopted the heritage strategy when they did their
OCP after.
OCP
Yeah,
and they did their rezoning. So
correct.
they had a tool in place that would guide that already. And I'll maybe turn to staff here and ask, and sorry to put you on the spot, Mr. Similini, but we have done the rezoning and amongst other things since in the 5 years since this was last presented to council. And I'm wondering if we need to do an effort, and I'm not suggesting it's a heavy effort, but an effort in concordance to understand that that our zoning and the strategy still sort of mesh, as it were.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to council. Yeah, that's correct. So, I mean, given that the strategy was written in 2020, small scale multi-unit housing at the time obviously wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
But it is really important to note that the guide from the province for small scale multi-unit housing goes over heritage properties and all the different heritage legislation in pretty good detail. So I think there's a lot of room there to be able to incorporate both together. One thing that we did potentially miss a little bit is having a heritage designation on a property prior to adoption of small scale multi-unit housing exempts it from that legislation. However, there's nothing saying that we can't say that a property has heritage value and again, try to incorporate and mesh those two documents together.
Thank you. And before you go, Mr. Similini, for all the reasons I've already cited, I think a heritage strategy is key to current planning and future planning of Fernie. But have you had for yourself sufficient time to look at this document in recent years to compare it to what's happened to make a decision or to guide council, realizing we're in committee of the whole, to guide council to say, yeah, now's the time for adoption, or my preference would be to look at it again for concordance.
Your Worship, I haven't had a chance to go through the document to see if there's anything that, outright would deny our ability to have small scale multi-unit housing, for example. And obviously we don't want those to conflict. But I do think it is an important document to have council recognize, because we want to be able to give it to the consultant working with the OCP and use this document moving forward in refreshing our OCP. Heritage conservation is an item in our OCP, but if you go through our OCP, the section on heritage conservation is like half a page. It's not really all that robust, and that was one of the main things that I wanted to look at through our OCP processes, is bulking that up. We did do a little bit of work since 2014. For example, we instituted the ability to do heritage alteration permits for those heritage properties, as opposed to development permits, which then we look at that through a scope. So in a way, we met that third goal of what was being requested tonight, and that if there is a heritage property that's undergoing any sort of renovations, exterior renovations, we do a heritage alteration permit. They're delegated to staff. They're reviewed by the design review panel in a heritage context. And what the difference between that and a development permit is, if it's a heritage property, we typically ask for the design to be done by some form of registered or a heritage professional to ensure that whatever's happening to that building is accurate as far as heritage guidelines go. So that's just an example of what we're doing. But yeah, I think that section of the OCP can definitely be bulked up, and I think that 2020 report is a great foundation for that.
Okay, so I guess where I'm leading ultimately is my preference would be, we are in a position to adopt this strategy as a community such that it informs our OCP update. And we've since let the contract for the OCP process. Given all of your other commitments, do we have time for review and come back to council and say we're comfortable?
Yeah, your worship, through to council, I mean, our capacity is pretty stretched right now, but I don't want that to delay this report being used in our OCP. I might be stepping out of my lane a little bit, but there may be a resolution that council can make that would allow us to use that document without actually committing to it if there's language in there that triples or puts us in violation of the small scale multi-unit housing legislation, for example. So I'm not in a position to suggest what that resolution might be at this point, but I think that there's a way to bring the report forward, use it in incorporating into our OCP, but making sure that it doesn't violate our legislative requirement to allow for a small scale multi-unit housing.
Well, it could, like, we couldn't adopt it and allow it, right? Like, presumably we couldn't allow it to conflict with legislation.
Yeah, your worship, that's correct. But I wonder if there's a way to, like, not necessarily officially adopt it as a city document, but still, like, let's use it as a resource. I think it's a really important resource to move forward with drafting of that OCP. But we should review it, or at least when we're moving forward with the OCP, let's put the 2020 document together with the province's guide and send that off to the consultant to review and come up with some policy. Like, there's got to be a way to be able to look at both documents together and just ensure that
They don't conflict.
yeah, that they don't conflict. Yeah.
Councillor Ramanas.
Thanks, Your Worship. Happy to drop a resolution to just get us to that point where the consultant can absorb these two sets of document at this point, if that's what the goal here is.
Yeah, well, I'm going to turn to our CAO. I have a particular leaning here, and it's that we adopt the heritage strategy to guide our planning, but that I guess I don't appreciate the danger of adopting it if it can't then conflict with legislation. Councillor McIsaac and then Councillor Ramanas.
Thank you, Worship. Although I am in favor of moving forward with this, I guess I would ask the question, can this document inform the OCP process without having been formally adopted? In other words, are we actually able to use it, incorporate it, inform the OCP process and so on? And then, having reached the end of the OCP process, we would have discovered areas within this particular strategy which don't conform with new legislation or whatever, and adopted at that same time as the OCP. Like, it could literally be like as a schedule of the OCP. This is
Right.
the heritage strategy that we're adopting, possibly with, as I mentioned, one or two minor changes. Now, I mentioned this without thinking about, I don't want to delay our ability to move forward on this, but that does seem the most prudent and also would be the right timing for staff and for the consultant as well.
Councillor Ramanas?
Same as
Okay,
the same point that I wanted to make.
okay, thank you. Mr. Barnowski, any comments?
A few. I think your corporate officer would probably echo, you're in committee of the whole, so you can't adopt. You can direct staff, or you can make a recommendation to council. So you could resolve as committee to recommend to council that you adopt it. Then, just like a bylaw, when it comes for adoption, it would just be attached without a report to a council meeting coming up in the future. And then you'd vote on adoption because it's not a bylaw. It's not going to require readings. Or as committee, you can direct staff. And to my mind, I think what you're saying is that you want to direct staff to include the heritage strategy in the development of our updated official community plan, and that the updated strategy and OCP be adopted together, or something to that extent. That's kind of what I'm hearing, I think.
Yeah, I think I like the sounds of that, because I think it accomplishes both, and it it ensures concordance through the entire process. Does that make sense, Mr. Simulini?
Yeah, it does, Your Worship. And if I may, and Mr. Barnowski, please feel free to jump in and stop me if I'm wrong, but I think that the legislation would obviously take precedent over
Yeah.
over the report. So there's really
I
no
think that's
harm
exactly
in
right.
adopting it. It's just
Yeah.
anything that's in that report that conflicts with the legislation wouldn't be able to be implemented.
Right.
Right.
Mr. Barnowski?
I agree with the manager. I don't have any qualms about adopting or endorsing a document that might conflict with new superseding legislation. I don't think we put ourselves in a bind, but my recommendation would be, as committee, if you want to adopt it, just a resolution that committee recommend to council you adopt. Or if you want to endorse it or ensure it's included in the OCP, direction to staff to include the heritage strategy in the OCP development and bring both documents forward for adoption when ready.
Perfect. Now, do you need a resolution for that? In committee or?
Yeah, Your Worship, in committee is enough. You can
Okay.
provide direction to staff in committee. If you give us one moment, I'll just get it back and forth with Lavinia in writing here.
Thank you. Councilor Reminis?
Sorry, Your Worship, I have to make this comment. If it is this easy, why did it take 5 years?
That's a very good question.
I know, I'm just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
wondering, yeah.
Well, and I think, I guess we could speculate. We've heard from some folks this evening, but it does seem the timing is particularly fortuitous to bring it forward now such that it fully informs the OCP and then is adopted as a schedule following the completions in the OCP. So it truly makes up part of that document. I think is a pretty solid strategy overall. But I understand your question. I can't answer it. I'm sorry.
I again, Worship, or Your Worship, I can't comment on the timing either. I can say that I don't know if I was an official member of the task force or not, but a de facto member, a representative of the city at the time. And so we definitely had a hand in drafting it. But then when I saw this on the agenda, I said to the corporate officer that I was 99.5% sure that it was already adopted. And so again, I don't recall what happened at the council meeting, but I'm glad to see it come forward tonight. And again, the landscape has obviously changed a little bit since 2020, but I think that we can really use the document moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Councilor Reminis?
One more thing, Your Worship, is there any kind of real life example of how having a heritage strategy has helped in infill or vice versa? Like, can I have a real life example?
Go for it.
Yeah, the Heritage BC workshop that I attended, that I mentioned, Alana was involved and there was 4 case study projects that I took screenshots of the pictures where there was different zoning and different heritage properties that were repurposed. But I think you can even see that in Fernie with the old Knox Church that got repurposed as the performing center, the LaRue Mansion, that, the outside appearance of that historic building is essentially the same, even though the inside's been repurposed. So that was kind of Alana's discussion points around how do cities maintain these heritage value properties, but potentially repurpose them or restore them, things like that.
Thank you.
And further, Your Worship, a great example by Mr. Palmeric, the LaRue property is a great example, as it not only saved the heritage building, we did a heritage revitalization agreement for that property, which is one of the things in our toolbox that the province gives us without needing to have a heritage conservation plan, for example.
Right.
But no doubt the heritage conservation plan comments on that tool. But it did directly have an infill component to it. The heritage revitalization agreement also allowed for a duplex on the property and a fourplex on the property that are potentially part of a phased development.
Thank you. Please.
The staff recommendation is that committee directs staff to include the 2020 Fernie Heritage Strategy in the development of the updated official community plan and bring both back for adoption when ready.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Reminis. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Palmeric. It's been a patient 5 years. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder that council return to the regular meeting. Moved by Councillor Hampton, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And now we move on to recalling Mr. Similini for item 10.1, the building and plumbing bylaw number 2526, 2025 for first, second, and third reading.
See how fast I can pivot.
Your pictures were in the 2020, there was pictures of you in the 2020 presentation that we received a copy of.
I told you I was there. I remember going to we did a field trip to the Crow's Nest Pass, and they have actually an excellent system there. And I know it's Alberta versus BV, but all the signs you see around the Crow's Nest Pass on the heritage buildings, they're like the green and orange signs. They did an excellent job. However, onto the building and plumbing bylaw. So I'm really excited to bring this forward tonight. The new building and plumbing bylaw number 2526 for first, second, and third reading. Speaking of 5-year projects, this is a longer than that project. This timeline came up when the project came to committee of the whole, but the original building bylaw, I shouldn't say the original building bylaw, our existing building bylaw was adopted way back in 2003. And speaking of times changing, in 2019, we had a draft bylaw that was brought forward to council. And you can see right on my slide there that COVID-19 killed that bylaw, I guess, from moving forward at the time. Recently, we reinvigorated the bylaw, and given our capacity, and I guess we can put a little plug in for ourselves here with the delegation bylaw and things like that, freed up our capacity to be able to work on this bylaw. So there's an example of the work we've been doing. So we brought forward the bylaw to committee of the whole earlier this year, and just basically gave a briefing on what the bylaw was all about. We then went back, refined the bylaw, especially the fees, which we'll dive into a little bit here tonight. And tonight it's coming forward for first, second, and third reading. I'll just quickly run through the sort of highlights of the bylaw, the same as I did at committee of the whole. The bylaw does, it's a fairly heavy, word-heavy document. I will note that in order to make the document really easy to interpret, we're planning on doing some resource information, some pamphlets, and some policies and procedures, things like that. That just sort of bring the wordy document down and make it a lot easier and more convenient to interpret. So it does cover exemptions. Our old bylaw didn't really have any exemptions in it. So this looks at things like decks that are a certain height, buildings that are a certain size that don't need building permits. It does cover damage to municipal property. So when somebody is working on a new build, for example, in a developed area, we want to make sure that the construction activity isn't going to damage things like sidewalks, curb stops, things like that. So this bylaw puts the onus on the owner to document any damage that's on the property previous to the building starting. And then that way, if that damage is noted, then they're not put on the hook for it after the fact. Demolition requirements. This is largely related to worker health and safety, mostly to do with hazardous material abatement. So if someone puts in for demolition permit and our inspectors have to go on site, it just reaffirms that all of the documentation is presented to the city that says that site is safe for our workers to go into. And then application requirements. This is an important one. This is something that's come up really consistently. I just want to note that we have published a checklist for the building community. And since we published that checklist, we've seen a pretty decent improvement in applications come forward. So we're seeing more and more complete applications. The application requirements in the bylaw are also consistent with Cloud Permit, which is going to be our permit tracking software. Quick update on that. We're looking at mid-May for implementation of that. So we're getting through the configuration process now, and we're looking at some user acceptance testing through April, and then by mid-May we'll hopefully be ready to go live. So that's great. It's just in time for the for the building rush. And again, the application requirements reaffirms our goal to receive more complete applications. One pivot that we made, again, related to the bylaw, which isn't adopted, but we're able to do this regardless. And the adoption of cloud permit is cloud permit doesn't allow somebody to submit an incomplete application. There's queues and you need to actually upload the documents before you're allowed to hit submit on your application. So one thing that we did is, rather than accepting applications incomplete and asking for the documentation to trickle in, which was really handcuffing us as far as our capacity, we have just started to deny incomplete applications. Just more to say that your application isn't being accepted. Here's the documents you need to supply, but your application isn't being accepted. So then people give us the documents, and then it goes into the queue. So it's not so much taking any permit fees and keeping them or anything at this point. It's just establishing that sort of your application doesn't count until you've supplied everything we need. Removes forms from the bylaw again, with going digital. This is important. We don't want to be tied to any paper forms in our bylaw. And also, if we do need to use paper forms for any reason, we have the freedom now to just publish a paper form that makes sense for us. Application and permit fees. I'll touch on this quickly. We just wanted to be really consistent with this council's strategic priorities and the City of Fernie Development Approvals Review Report, which essentially says that development should pay for itself and that the taxpayer shouldn't subsidize private development. And the way that we got this is there's two different things, and I'll go into a little bit of detail. As we compared to other municipalities, and we also looked at a cost recovery approach. And conditional occupancies is important. It's something we have done in the past. However, it wasn't regulated in our bylaw clearly. This allows our building official to give a conditional occupancy on a building. For example, if you build a house in the middle of winter, landscaping is something that you need to do before you get final occupancy. You want to move in, you can't do the landscaping until the spring. So it allows you to move in and get that conditional occupancy. And then it ensures that you actually follow through on that work before your permit expires and able to get final occupancy. Now the fees, I wanted to talk about a little bit, and please jump in if you need to. There's two main sets of fees. One is the application fees, your building permit application, your demolition permit application. We used a cost recovery approach for that because we have a handle on how many hours we spend, for example, taking an application in, putting it into the system, processing it, moving through that process through to permit issuance. The second one is the actual permit fees. And that was a comparison of other communities. As you see there, we looked at 12 other communities. However, only 6 of those used a flat rate, which is what we're looking at, as opposed to tiered rates. So we never looked at the tiered rates because we were using that flat rate. So what we did is we looked at those 6 communities. They had their bylaws adopted at different times as well, but we adjusted their rates for inflation. And then we took an average of those rates to apply to Fernie. So Fernie's old rate was $8 per $1,000 of construction value for a building permit. The average that we looked at was $10.29. So we rounded down to $10 for $1,000 of construction value. Again, we based this on a couple different things. If you were to adjust the $8 that used to be in the old bylaw for inflation, it's up around $12, give or take. But we thought that given that the cost of building in Fernie is already reasonably higher than the surrounding communities, that the $10 would strike a balance. And it's also keeping in mind that if the cost of building increases in Fernie, the $10 stays the same, but your price of the building permit increases with the cost of building. And again, the cost recovery model that we looked at for fees is important to note. Essentially, we just looked at the amount of hours and resources that go into processing a permit application, including software costs, things like that, and came up with an approximate number. averages out. Sometimes the permits take longer than others and some don't take as long, but it's just an average number.
Councillor McIsaac?
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question. Are we expecting that cost to go down? Like as cloud permit is fully integrated and our applications are coming in and they're no longer incomplete. And so we haven't spent all that time finding out that it's not complete before sending it back, et cetera, and shortening that process. Are we expecting the actual cost to come down?
Worship through to Councillor McIsaac. It's a really good question. I don't know if that cost will go down or not because the way that we calculate it is based on a complete application. So for all of the back and forth that we were doing before, there was obviously a cost associated with that, but we didn't want to portray that in our fees because if we're operating at, call it optimum efficiency, we wanted to base our fees on that. So we don't want to charge somebody for back and forth. That's not going to happen anymore.
Councillor Evans?
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll come to the dollars and cents in a little bit. I haven't digested that piece of information. I want to go back a couple of slides before, Manager, if you wouldn't mind. Like it just seems like you're staging this in such a way that, you know, once cloud permit comes into place, you can pull the trigger on this. Is that a fair understanding? So my follow-up question is, are there any other bylaws that needs update before cloud permit becomes operational? Or is this it?
Yeah. Your Worship, through to Councillor Ramadas, as far as cloud permit becoming operational, this is it. There are related bylaws that we'll need to look at. Things like the MTI bylaw, for example, that allows our bylaw officers to give fines for non-compliance. But I mean, there is an existing MTI bylaw, but you may want to look at updating it because it's the values in that bylaw, for example, are low. But again, that's a bylaw that's related, but by no means is it tied directly to implementation of cloud permit. The building bylaw is the bylaw that needs to be adopted for cloud permit to work properly.
Mr. Baranowski?
For the building module in cloud permit, you'll be aware that there are a number of modules, a number of different types of permits and licenses we offer. And so as we work through this, we're good in that we did the building and subdivision servicing bylaw already, doing building bylaw. If we wind up rolling into other modules, including business licensing or bylaw enforcement, we then will look at updates to those bylaws so that everything's fresh with implementation. But the modeling, the modules, and the user testing is all based around this. So, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Your Worship. That is a really good point. For example, we have the planning module in cloud permit that we are signed up for as well. It looks at development permits, development variance permits, things like that. So there may be some amendments to those bylaws, related bylaws, fees and charges, things like that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay to move on?
Yeah, please.
Perfect. So in front of you here is the fee table or a copy of the fee table. It just looks at what the fee is in our current bylaw and what it's being increased to. Again, keeping in mind that the old fees are from 2003 and in dire need of an update. The new fees you see at the top there, the application fees are based on that cost recovery model. And then the permit fees are based on the model where we compared other communities. It's also worth noting that at the bottom there, we did some fees that may or may not need to be charged. For example, if our building officials need to revisit a site multiple times for the same inspection, there's a charge for that. So essentially, the first 2 visits are covered with the building permit fee. But if they have to go back 3, 4, 5 times to do the same inspection, there's a charge. It's not something that we're hoping to have to use. It's more of an incentive to have the builders get things done properly the first or second time and move forward. And again, I don't foresee that being much of an issue, but it's again, I'm not pointing out anybody in particular in the building community, but there have been instances where they essentially use an inspection for a consulting period, right? Where they just call the building official to get them to show them how to do it properly. And again, nobody in particular, it's just, it has happened in the past. So we want to try to get away from that. overall, an estimation here, we just looked at plumbing permits, for example. In 2024, our plumbing permit fees were, application fees were $1,280. With the increase, it would bring it up over $4,600 to, again, pay for the process within reviewing and issuing that permit. And then if you look at the bottom there, increase in that $10 to $8. In 2024, we had a total building permit value of just under $30 million. Those permits were charged out at $238,000. And if you're to move those numbers into the new bylaw, we would be at $298,000. So we'd be increasing the money coming into the city by just under $60,000. That's all I really have on fees as far as me talking. If any councillors have any questions or discussion points on those, I can address them.
Council? No, I think you're good.
So when we came to the committee of the whole, we brought forward a little bit of a public education period where we did a little bit of a presentation of the bylaw through social media and the free press. We did have a little bit of feedback from one builder in particular. Two concerns. One had to do with the timeline on requesting inspections. The bylaw from MIADC said 48 working hours. If you Google 48 working hours, there's a whole bunch of different definitions of that. We said 5 days in the bylaw originally. That's 6 days, I guess, is 48 working hours if you look at it that way. Or 2 days is 48 working hours, whichever way you put it, if it's a 24-hour day as opposed to an 8-hour day of work. We amended the bylaw from 5 down to 2. So a building, someone who is requesting an inspection just needs to give our building official 2 days notice. Doesn't mean they'll get the inspection in 2 days because capacity and other inspections and other work may come into play, but they'll be able to request that. And actually cloud permit, once implemented, you can actually set the request timeline for a 2-day gap. So it'll take care of that as well. And the other concern was just a clarification on one of the fees. If you need to reapply for a building permit fee, the table says that you need to pay $6 for every $1,000 of work. That's $1,000 of work remaining in the project. So if you're working on a $1.5 million project, you've finished $1 million of it, you need to reapply. That means our building official needs to do further review to make sure that everything is still okay on the project. You pay $6 for that, for the extra $500,000 that's left over. So there's just clarification to that individual. Again, we'll go over the implications of the bylaw. It really just improves our processes, allows us, our building officials, it gives them the leverage to be able to make those decisions. And if they are questioned, they can refer back to the bylaw and explain how and why they're making those decisions. And again, cloud permit is a really important player here. It just really allows us to implement cloud permit with the most current bylaw and move forward. And again, there is some change management that needs to be thought of here. I anticipate working with our planning and development team and the building officials to come up with a series of pamphlets and information that will inform builders and community members as to what the bylaw means. And a lot of that comes through that implementation of cloud permit as well. And further, I think that a lot of what's in that bylaw can be clarified through process and procedure documents. So to round out, I'm just hoping that council gives first, second, and third reading to the bylaw tonight, and then we can move it forward for adoption at a later meeting.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Fernie.
Worship.
Questions from council? Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. I guess I'm just a little bit surprised that there's only one local developer that commented on this new bylaw, given the number of people that we have building in the community. Can you just review how long we put that out there for people, and if we emailed that list of all the people that were here for that development review? Did we do that?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Nixon, we did. We have the list from the LGDAP project, or so we had that email list who we sent it out to. We sent the notification to the Chamber of Commerce. We did public notice through Free Press, social media, website, and then we also sent it to the Canadian Home Builders Association to distribute to their members as well. And then lastly, it was just a bit of a word of mouth campaign where when our building officials were out and about, they just casually mentioned it. So we followed the communications plan that was presented to Committee of the Whole.
So everybody's happy. This is good. Thank you very much.
As far as I know, Councillor Nixon, yeah.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just curious, how much work is remaining on LGDAP still? Is it all done?
Yeah, Your Worship, through to Councillor Ramirez, the document from McElhaney, really, if taken as a whole, if we were to say that all the work is done there, and then we've gone through a complete cultural change with the city, it's really that big. I believe I distributed to council through an email or a memo a while back some of the things that we had done, because a lot of the work on that LGDAP document, I should say Local Government Development Approvals Project, was just sort of being done through our work that we had scheduled. It was just listed. I mean, cloud permit, for example, is one of those things. And then these exercises where we're bringing our fees up to a current standard. So we really haven't had the chance to take a step back and strategize over that overall document, as opposed to just going through the document and saying, oh, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. So, I mean, percentage complete, again, that document's massive. Percentage complete, I'd say like maybe 10. But again, it's all moving towards that end goal.
Follow?
Your Worship, what's the realistic goal here? Like what will we be happy with? 10% completion, 20% completion?
Mr. Bornowski?
I think my goal for the department and for the director and manager in that department is to see meaningful continual improvement. And so that's a reduction in processing times, an increase in customer satisfaction, an increase in their efficiency, and their ability to start to work on LGDAP. It's not really a strict, like I want to see 70 or 80 or 90% of the LGDAP recommendations completed and adopted. I would say probably 75 of the LGDAP recommendations are really solid. Some of the others are a bit soft and are like, yes, we've encouraged people to submit complete applications, or we've implemented some new checklists and some forms. So they're really minor. But I think your question raises a good item, and that is, as we come back and talk to council about cloud permit and rollout, a review of the specific action items with the tick list to show you what's been in progress and what the next actions are gives you an idea of how we're advancing that overall.
Yeah, your worship too. And just further, I think that Mr. Palmeric earlier today talked about implementation of an OCP policies. And when I first presented to council after the last election on the OCP, we said that the OCP has been a really solid document for how we should be doing things in the current. But it also has an implementation plan, and we've really missed on that implementation, right? This document I see is the same. It's got some really solid language on how we should be doing things now, and we've really started to do those things, and we've gotten some momentum on those, which is great. But there's also those larger sort of project-based items that we need to really consider and include in our work plans moving forward. And again, we've got permit tracking software, for example, is one of those large items that we're checking off, right? So we really need to incorporate that into our work plans and say, okay, what are we going to work on now? Make sure we have the capacity to move forward, the funding to move forward, and those types of things. So it's not just a document where we can just start to check them off the list, because there needs to be some really large considerations as far as how we can do our work moving forward. Further?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to be clear, CAO, my goal is also the same. If the turnaround time improves and we are no more the bottleneck with the developer and builder community, I am a happy customer. All I wanted to see was, what's the traction with all the recommendations that those consultants gave us.
Your worship, through to Councillor Ramirez, I can make a quick comment on turnaround times. Part of our key performance indicators with cloud permit is looking at how fast we can turn a permit around with cloud permit versus how long it was taking with the, call it traditional methods that we were using. And so our team has started to look at those. We pulled, I want to say, 50 permit applications from the last few years, and we're looking at the back and forth. So at one point, outside of the cloud permit implementation and key performance indicators, we'll be able to report back to council on here's what the turnaround times were under the old system. So that should be coming here in the next little while for information.
Mr. Baranowski?
If I can really briefly, so there were 7 big strategic recommendations. And for the most part, we've made really significant progress on every single one of those big strategic recommendations. Inside, there's a lot more. As an example, holistic staff training and PD on the books, implement a cost recovery model that's integrated in this bylaw. You'll see that in other bylaws, including as we work through our fees and charges throughout the year. Fostering internal collaboration, we've done some process improvements, enhance the intake process, and then adopt a comprehensive digital transformation strategy. Anybody who's worked with a large organization knows that is massive, right? That's a 10-year project. But we've done our enterprise system review.
Yeah.
We're overhauling our entire GIS and geospatial systems, integrating that with our core enterprise system and financial data and maintenance management data. So we're progressing in meaningful ways. And then the last 2 are modernizing our legislative framework, strategies that encourage infill and multifamily, and bolster affordable housing. So I would say there's meaningful progress on each, but I think a report card would be really helpful. And as we look at our annual report or other reporting opportunities, there may be a really good opportunity to tie back to some of these strategies. So thank you.
Other questions from council? Just quickly, Mr. Simley, is it the MIABC sort of template, is that commonly used across the province? Has that become fairly common? And is it becoming more common as more people adopt cloud permit type software?
Yeah, Your Worship, as I understand it, is a fairly commonly used template. So they distributed it to all of their members and said, here's a really good bylaw that has been legally reviewed, obviously, by them. But we took that bylaw and we were able to customize it not once but twice, because it was customized in 2019. And then, for example, back in 2019, step code was something that was coming, and it wasn't something that was already here. So the original bylaw actually implemented step code early, but then bylaw never got adopted. Time passed. Well, step code's already a thing. We don't have to have that language in the bylaw anymore.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's a common template.
Yeah, because it feels complete and fairly unambiguous. Like it's pretty, as I read through it again this time after the committee of the whole, it's pretty straightforward.
I'm sorry that you read it. It's a lot of reading. It's a heavy bylaw. It is a very heavy bylaw.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's all the information that you need is there, right? And it's not like our other bylaw where we would end up getting into philosophical arguments over what the bylaw was trying to do.
No, I think that's the
there,
point
yeah.
I'm trying to make. It's pretty unambiguous. And I'll tell you, I read it in such detail. There are 2 uses of situate that should be situated. So that's how close I read.
I promise that I'm not the lawyer that wrote it.
Any other questions from Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Worship. So we talked about this a little bit last couple of weeks ago about short-term rental and fees and attaching to CPI and stuff like that. And I'm just curious, because I know that we do this with our facility rental rates. My concern is that, we're not going to look at this again until 2044, because we haven't looked at it since 2006. And you can look at that number from 2006 until now, and every year we've lost more and more, and we find ourselves in a hole. So is there a possibility to attach these rates to CPI, or like Councillor McIsaac said, if our costs go down, is there an opportunity there to adjust the rates as well?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Nixon, another really good question. Where we want our rates to actually live is in our fees and charges bylaw, but understanding that is an undertaking all on its own to get that bylaw completely adopted. we adopted these rates and put them into this bylaw as you could call it almost a temporary measure for us to be able to function with the bylaw and move forward. So the end goal is to remove these rates from the bylaw. And the bylaw, if you read through the bylaw, it's actually worded in a manner that allows that to happen, where you just need to go through and make a couple minor adjustments to the bylaw. So it's not like our building bylaw would need a major amendment to remove the schedule. So that's one thing. And the other thing that I think is really important, and it's something that may be in the McLean that we've been talking about, is a periodic review of bylaws like this, where it's scheduled for us to sit down once a year or once every 2 years, or once or twice a year, or however often we think it's necessary to look at the bylaw, not only from a fees perspective, but just from a legislative perspective, and ensuring that it's current and up to date. And that's really gotten away from us in the past. But I think that here we have a brand new bylaw. It's fresh. We know it's good. Like, let's schedule some time for that to ensure that it happens.
Councillor Ramirez?
Thanks, Your Worship. I think that number is already baked into the denominator there, as your constructed value keeps increasing, which in the last 20 years probably has outshot the CPI by a long way. So well into the future, you're somehow automatically already absorbing that CPI raises.
Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Ramirez has a good point. That building permit fee is true. However, for like the application fees, that's a static number. So that could be something we'd look at. I mean, for example, if you give me if you double my money in a raise, then we'd have to do that. I'm not asking for that. No, but I mean, as fees change, if they increase or decrease, then it's, those numbers that we estimated based on staff hours go down. And same with efficiencies. If we come across efficiencies in staff hours on permits decrease, for example, if the chatbot allows us to review permit applications quicker, then we incorporate that, and again, we include that in our review.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else? With that, I'll ask our corporate officer to read the recommendation. And
The recommendation is that the building and plumbing bylaw number 2526/2025 be given first, second, and third readings.
moved by Councillor McIsaac, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Simulini.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Council.
Item 11.1, support for RDK Regional Emergency Operations, a report from our Deputy Fire Chief.
Got that. Good evening, Your Worship, Council. I'm here tonight asking for a council resolution to partner with the RDK with the Emergency Operations Centre grant. The grant is from the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund stream from UBCM, Union of British Columbia Municipalities. This grant, we've partnered with the RDK in the past. This is our third time, so 2 years, 2022, 2023, and now 24, 25. City of Fernie partners with the RDK in something called the East Kootenay Emergency Management Program. City of Fernie, there's all the municipalities and all the First Nations in the East Kootenays partner with the RDK in this program. And whenever these grants come up, they ask if we want to partner with them in the grant as well. And in this particular instance, there's the Regional District of East Kootenay, the 3 First Nations there, Akan, Makiskanik, and Shuswap, and then 5 local governments of Cranbrook, Kimberley, Rajamin, Vermeer, and potentially ourselves, assuming it goes well tonight. And that will give a total of $360,000 to this grant. Broken down, sort of as it says there, before anybody does any quick math, that doesn't add up to 360,000. But they do allow some contingency because obviously grants last for 12 months and some of those prices will change. So essentially that's how it's going to break down. 92,000 they're looking at for digitalization and equipment upgrades in the EOC. So that would be a video wall and GIS plotter. They're also looking at a 100 kilovolt portable generator. And the purpose behind that is if there's a power outage, then that voltage could be used to power a reception center, for example, or if it's critical infrastructure that needs to be powered, then could be used to power that. And it would be moved around the region as necessary, stored in Cranbrook, but could be moved to whichever municipality needs it. They're also looking to upgrade their amateur radio capability. And so that's the backup communication system. For example, if cell towers were to go down, phone didn't work, then amateur radio is one of the options. And also in that, I think they're looking at some mobile satellite equipment. They're looking at some training. As part of partnering with the RDK on this, we've asked that they look at critical incident stress management training, and that's sort of a condition of us partnering with them, that they look at putting on courses so that we can train people in critical incident management. We partnered with them last year, and they're putting on some resilient mines training as a part of that. So that's sending in firefighters and emergency responders so that they can know how to cope with difficult situations. Critical incident stress management is the next level to that, and it would be looking at training peer support so that we would go and whoever took that training would be able to then assist in critical incident management if it's needed. Currently, there's no critical incident management team in the valley. Not forwarded 2 or 3 years ago, so it's something we're very keen across the municipality, across the region to get back. And there'll also be some emergency operations center related in-person training that will be open to all municipalities and First Nations region. And then finally, they're looking at a drone with training. And the reason behind that is quite often emergencies and disasters aren't easily accessible. For example, it's not easy to run a river if it's flooding, whereas if you can send a drone up and down it, then you can get those pictures. Same with wildfires, they quite often out in the backcountry and not easy to scan. So a drone would help with that. So that's what they've broken it down for this year, those particular projects.
Sorry, Deputy Chief, Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Deputy Chief, why do I have a feeling that I have seen this before this time last year? Many of these things. Did we not apply for this last year also?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Ramirez. That is correct. Yes, as I said, we partnered with, this will be our third year in a row where we've partnered with them.
What was, sorry,
the actual,
if you wouldn't mind, just what's the success rate so far? Like, have any of the grant applications succeeded?
they succeed every year.
Mhm.
They've succeeded every year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on.
Last year, I think, was 160,000. And what we're finding is that each year they're requesting that more municipalities are seeing the benefit in partnering with the RDK on these grants. One of the big benefits of having the RDK actually take over the grant is they do all the administration and paperwork. Managing a grant is quite a lengthy process, and we basically hand that off to them to deal with. Anything further? Sorry, you look like you're thinking. Okay. So yeah, one of the benefits, another benefit of being with the ECAMP, like your abbreviations over here, East Kootenay Emergency Management Program is, as I say, they're managing the grant. They'll do all the administration. They will buy everything, look after the money. They'll be responsible for submitting the report in 12 months to UBCM to show where the money's been spent and how it's been spent. And from a City of Fernie staff perspective, all our involvement really is this process and getting the resolution, then working with the emergency program coordinators, particularly around the critical incident management training side of it, making sure that they follow through on that and that we get that training. That's pretty much it then, in terms of staff involvement. So it takes away all that work from city staff and from a management perspective.
Sorry, Deputy Chief, what about things like the drone training? Like, is that distributed across the region, or is it concentrated in 1 or 2 operators in who work for the RDK? I'm just curious.
Your worship, I think knowing a little bit about drones, it will be, they won't be offering that training around the region. They will
No.
be training an operator or two, wherever that drone is located, and then the drone and the operator will move to where it's needed.
Okay, yeah, I suspected as much. Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Kind of a similar vein question, but with, I mean, with all of this emergency operations stuff, you know, there's 7, 8 communities, but there's significantly more communities in the regional district. I guess, what sort of pressure or leverage or communications might be the more diplomatic term with the other communities to get them to partner with these things? 'Cause I guess where I'm going is, it seems to me that in an emergency, we're going to support everybody, no matter whether they partnered with us on this or not. But if they're not partnering, they're leveraging these resources that, you know, we could, if it's $40,000 each, you know, add Sparwood Elkford, that's another $80,000. What additional could we be actually gaining with a few phone calls and getting those councils to jump on board too?
Your worship, through to Councillor Hamilton. So part of being on eCamp is they have bi-monthly meetings where all the municipalities, well, they break it down to 3 regions: Columbia, Central, and Mount Valley. And all those different municipalities get together bi-monthly to discuss this sort of thing. With respect, each of the municipalities are, and I think there's one First Nation not there, they've obviously identified the need locally where they can spend that money. And that's actually something we would possibly do next year or the year after. This is an ELC grant, and thinking ahead, thinking positively, and the fire hall, that will probably have an ELC in it. We discussed whether we could use this grant this year for that, and it's just a little too early in the process. But assuming things move at the correct pace, then 2026, 2027, if that grant funding is still available, then we will look locally to use that money just ourselves, just for our own ELC. And I suspect that's what's happened with these other First Nations and municipalities who haven't partnered this year. But I can't specifically speak to what their intention is. Yeah, so I think I've covered everything I need to cover there. So I guess it's just, that was the resolution. And any further questions?
Any further questions from council? Seeing none, I'll ask our corporate officer to read the.
The staff recommendation is a very long one. It's a mouthful. That the Regional District of East Kootenay, RDIC, be authorised to submit a joint application on behalf of the City of Fernie to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, UBCM, under the Grant Stream Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, CEPF, for the Emergency Operations Centre, EOC, and training to support the EOC upgrade and modernisation project to build emergency operations capacity. And that should the application be successful, that the RDEC be authorised to receive and manage the funds and to provide overall grant management for the project.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any further discussion?
Just
All
a
those-
comment about how nice it is to see a backup generator in there, your worship.
From personal experience. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, Deputy Chief, and good luck. With that, we will move on to reports from council. And I will pick on, surprise, Councillor Nixon.
Well, I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Councillor McIsaac. Okay. Councillor Ravenous?
Nothing much, your worship. I still will be attending the chamber meeting on April 11th. Yeah. And the other thing that I would want to remind community is maybe go check out the all candidates forum for the federal election. I think Chamber of Commerce has posted
Yes.
the dates
Yeah.
and urge people who are on the fence to go and listen to all the candidates there.
Yeah, good reminder. Thank you for raising that. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Councillor Ramadas stole half my thunder there. But there's also next Monday, an open forum from Protect Our Winters at the Art Station that highly recommend people attend to listen, being we're a winter sports community. Library had their AGM last week. As usual, apparently, it was well attended by the board, and that was it. I also attended the Tourism Fernie AGM, which had a significantly larger number of people on Thursday last week. Council Cafe yesterday was also quite well attended. And a note that the library on June 13th and 14th is having their big book sale again. So make sure you mark your calendars and get ready to go buy some books.
Thank you,
That's all.
Councillor. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you for your patience, Worship. Last week, I had the opportunity to travel to Victoria on behalf of UBCM, where I and the other executives enjoyed much nicer weather than it was here. But not that we were outside much, because we spent a whole bunch of our time in the legislature going door to door to MLAs and ministers, where we spent a bunch of time talking about infrastructure and affordable housing and emergency healthcare. We had great meetings with them and very positive feedback, both from opposition MLAs as well as current government MLAs and ministers. The subjects were everything from strategic stimulus investments, and continuing money into the distribution for the Canada Community Building Fund, long-term local government infrastructure programs, scaling up provincial investment in affordable housing and supportive housing, trying to get an investment improvement in BC housing in order to improve their efficiency and the programs that some of our local housing groups, for example, are working with. We asked about property transfer tax for municipalities, and in the healthcare side, Heart and Hearth funding. We're not recipient of it this time, but there are 5 communities around the province who receive support through these programs specifically for homeless response and sheltering and so on. And there was a large pitch from the group to expand this to other communities because it's a problem in many, many different locations. More long-term funding for mental health and policing programs and mental health care and complex care facilities. So it was very rewarding and just great time spent with FaceTime. I really appreciate the time that we get when we go to UBCM and the chance we have to make direct Fernie comments to there. But this was much nicer in that it was much less time constrained, where we weren't hustling us out the door to get the next group in. Having said that, they were busy because it was budget season, of course. So we didn't have all day with them, but it was a good experience, and we got a lot done.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Councillor. And on a similar vein, on March 26th, we had the Minister of Lands, Water and Resource Stewardship and the Minister of Environment here in town, and took the opportunity to take them out to our wastewater treatment facility, and very receptive to our process and what we're working through. And so that was a very valuable visit with them. Everything else I think has been touched on, but just wanted to say, yeah, the tourism AGM, well attended, enjoyed that opportunity. And again, wanted to thank all those who attended our council cafe, because as Councillor Hamilton said, it was very well attended and very sort of frank discussions. So very grateful for everybody. And with that, we will move on to item 16.1, and I will ask our corporate officer to read the recommendation and then ask for a mover and a seconder.
The recommendation is that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to Section 91E of the Community Charter, as the subject matter being considered at this time relates to the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements. If the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. And with that, we'll take a 5-minute recess before we convene to in camera. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening.